At the 2020 Academy Awards, Bong Joon-ho's film Parasite made history. It became the first film not in the English language to win Best Picture, the highest honor at the Academy Awards.
일로 바싹 올라와 봐.
얘들아, 되는 거야?
돼.
자, 그러면은 카톡 한번 확인해봐. 피자 시대 연락 준다 그랬거든.
For Americans, what wins at the Academy Awards usually factors into what films become popular that year. Though the Oscars may not have much influence in the social political world, they have a lot of cultural influence.
And the Oscar goes to Parasite.
Bong Joon-ho.
Parasite.
Bong Joon-ho. Parasite.
Parasite's historic win was major, because following the success of the film, many people who may normally not choose to watch subtitled films went out to go see a film that wasn't in their language. It was widely discussed on social media, and people of all ages in the US were overcoming the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, as Bong Joon-ho put it.
말이 안 나오네요.
I'm speechless.
상상도 해본 적이 없는 일이 실제로 벌어지니까 일단 너무 기쁘고 기쁩니다. 예.
We never imagined this to ever happen. We are so happy.
Parasite is a Korean film. It is a Korean-backed project with a Korean cast and crew, as well as a Korean setting for the story. However, it seems the film resonated with people globally, as themes of wealth disparity and family drama are relatable to people all over the world.
Yes, I saw Parasite before it won Best Picture. I think Parasite definitely deals with topics that are relatable globally, and I think the whole idea of, or not the idea, but the theme of wealth disparity is something that anybody around the world can relate to in some way.
Then when Parasite came out, when I went back to Devon for a bit, I could kind of see it anywhere at any of the major cinemas, and it got screened in black and white and in colour, which was very surprising to me.
It was just like nothing I've ever seen. Like, it didn't even have a genre until the end, I would say. Like, it really made me open to trying different movies from different countries, because obviously, even with the language barrier, like, it can be a great movie.
Like with Parasite, it was groundbreaking because it reflected something that is going to happen. And stuff like anything that's like nominated for an Oscar and has to do with, recent times, whether it's like a political change. So Moonlight, for example, I would think of that as a national cinematic piece because, gay marriage got legalized in 2015 and that stuff was happening. And then meanwhile, we were having like BLM stuff too. So that's kind of what comes to my mind, at least something that's changing, something that's relevant to the economic or geopolitical times in the nation or around the nation.
Seeing how Parasite was able to reach and move audiences globally, what makes a culturally specific piece of national cinema also have international appeal? According to sociologist Anthony Smith, nationalism is an ideological movement for the attainment and maintenance of the unity and identity of a human population sharing a historic territory.
But in terms of England, I think of things like Andrea Arnold's films, so Fish Tank, which I saw quite recently, and her short film Wasp and stuff like that. And then also, like Ken Loach's films and things like This Is England, which is both a film and a TV series. Those all kind of like British social realist films that really capture something that is very sort of essentially English.
I think any movie that explicitly just like talks about the country in question and and doesn't really question it. It's more just like, oh yeah, America's great or Italy's great or whatever. I feel like those kind of speak to the nationalism in the movie.
I'd say the language is really important in deciding like what country that movie's from.
Again, I don't think there's any real way to define national cinema. I taught a New Zealand film course in New Zealand, and we had this conversation pretty much every day, because if you ask anyone outside of New Zealand, is The Lord of the Rings a New Zealand film? They'll say absolutely. If you ask people in New Zealand, apart from Peter Jackson, they'll say not really.
Therefore, if national cinema is tied to nationalism, that also makes the concept of national cinema purely ideological. Nationalism in cinema can be seen in the form of propaganda. However, I'm going to focus on how a national cinema can be used to draw attention to political issues specific to a nation. A national cinematic tradition can be created through a certain style of filmmaking, or by addressing specific elements of that nation's society and culture. We cannot think about cinema solely in terms of physical nations, because since the birth of cinema, the art form has transcended borders. But one can't completely ignore the role the nation plays in cinema. In British drama Fish Tank, directed by Andrea Arnold, we see the struggles of a young teenage girl growing up in estate housing in Essex. Much of the turmoil she faces is specific to the United Kingdom setting.
I'm only going for a drive.
You want to come?
No.
Both of you?
No, they won't want to
I
come.
do.
Look, we're not going nowhere.
I don't care. I still want to come.
In 2019, Lee Isaac Chung's film Minari was released, which, though is a mostly Korean language film, it has very American themes and an American setting. It subverts the traditional narrative of white English-speaking characters leading American films.
그게 바로 머리를 쓰는 거야. 알겠지?
앤 여기 있어.
엄마.
Jafar Panahi's 2015 Taxi is a very self-referential piece, in which Panahi deals directly with censorship laws in Iran, whilst illegally making a film after he had been banned from filmmaking. He cleverly uses the set of the taxi as a way to discreetly make his film without drawing the attention of the government.
پرهیز از خشونت، ممنوعیت استفاده از کراوات برای شخصیت‌های مثبت، عدم استفاده از اسامی ایرانی برای شخصیت‌های مثبت. بهتر است از اسامی اعم اطهار باشد. اسامی مبارک اعم اطهار باشد.
Throughout the history of global cinema, politically engaged film movements in one nation have influenced filmmaking in other nations. A potent example of this is the global history of the realist movement, and how it manifested itself in different nations. Beginning in Italy in the early 50s, there was the rise of the neo-realist movement, which involved some key factors which then went on to influence realist movements in other nations. Some of these factors included using non-actors, shooting films on location, and portraying the lives of working-class citizens, moving away from only representing the upper class in films.
arrivato Zampano.
È arrivato Zampano.
È arrivato Zampano.
È arrivato Zampano.
Italian neorealism then influenced filmmakers in France, and thus emerged the French New Wave. This movement took some elements from the Italian neorealist movement. However, adapting these ideas to French culture, a distinctly French version of this movement came to be.
Ouais, il faut que j'aille avenue Georges V.
Ok, je vous laisse.
Allez, remonte avec moi.
Jusqu'à la rue alors. New York Herald Tribune.
Je te le rends, il n'y a pas d'horoscope.
Qu'est-ce que c'est l'horoscope?
L'horoscope, c'est l'avenir. J'ai envie de savoir l'avenir, pas toi?
Moi aussi. New York Herald Tribune. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Rien, je te regarde.
Vous êtes fâché que j'ai parti sans dire au revoir?
Non, mais j'étais furieux parce que j'étais triste. C'est agréable pas de s'endormir, mais de se réveiller à côté d'une fille.
Vous allez rester à Paris?
Oui, faut que je voie un type qui me doit de l'argent. Après, il faut que je te voie toi.
Around the same time the French New Wave was flourishing, a similar movement began in the UK, with filmmakers like Ken Loach and Tony Richardson, and later Mike Leigh. They developed British social realism, a genre which dealt with the stories of working-class British citizens.
I've got to work hard all week to pay for it. It's the only place I've ever had that's all mine and nobody else's.
It's a bit big for one, though, isn't it, Joe?
Why? Thinking of moving in?
No, not likely.
Haven't you got an home to go to?
No, my landlady threw me out.
Why?
Mind your own business.
You can stay if you tell me.
Well, I was behind with the rent.
That's a lie for a start.
No, it's not.
Oh, come on, Jeffrey Ingham. Let's have a bit of light on the subject.
Maggie! Maggie! You all right there, Chief? Have you lost somebody?
Yeah?
Are you looking for somebody?
Fuck off, cunt.
When the neo-realist movement hit Iran, the genre had to adapt to fit the strict censorship laws present there. Therefore, filmmakers could not directly criticize the government like in other countries, so they had to creatively find ways to use symbolism, surrealism, mysticism, abstraction, and indirection to subvert the usual stories told in neo-realist narrative cinema, while still conveying a politically engaged message. Today, the content that we are seeing is literally changing because of the ways in which people are consuming cinema. Since the start of the shutdowns due to the pandemic, people have been unable to go to the movie theaters. Therefore, people are forced to watch films on small screens at home. When watching a film on a small screen, the spectacle factor of the film becomes less important, and the message and heart of the story comes to the forefront. Films like Lee Isaac Chung's Minari, Chloe Zhao's Nomadland, and Alfonso Cuarón's Roma have been able to shine in the small screen format, whereas a film like Christopher Nolan's Tenet is not conducive to being watched on a laptop. In speaking with many of my peers, I learned that the accessibility of films on streaming services has been the leading reason why many of them have been branching out to watch different types of films that they may not have been as willing to go see at the movie theater.
Issa, au tableau. Ouais, mais c'est tout de suite Issa, comme par hasard tout le temps.
Monsieur, ça c'est parce que c'est un Renault que vous l'envoyez en galant.
Yannis, s'il te plaît, je veux pas entendre ce genre de réflexion. La récréation, c'est terminé, on n'est plus là pour rigoler, t'as compris?
Wesh, monsieur, c'est quoi ça? Ah, monsieur, elle est dure celle-là, elle est compliquée.
Regardez, il est plus grand que le tableau.
But how do I access films? Definitely streaming. Streaming is a huge part of how I've watched any movie in the recent past, obviously because of the pandemic, but even before that, I loved going to theaters, but I think the majority of movies that I'd seen, especially in terms of like watching older movies and like so-called classics, those were all like watched like on my laptop on a streaming service.
I feel like now I see so many movies that honestly forget a lot of the plots because I go through movies so fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's very insular. I mean, they try and persuade us that they're more open-minded, but they're really not, it seems to me. There's a lot of great filmmaking in other places that just know why they choose particular kinds of foreign movies. Who the hell knows?
There is a lot of contention at the moment in the film industry between a traditional view on how films should be released and streaming services. However, we can't deny that the easily accessible content on subscription streaming services is quickly changing the century-old experience of cinema.
リンが悪いからじゃないんだよ。好きだから叩くんだよなんてのはね、嘘なの。好きだったらね。好きだったらね。
Rather than trying to fight against the inevitable rise of home viewing, I think we should learn to embrace this change because it is creating opportunities for audiences to view more diverse films than ever before. Though the algorithms streaming services use today to recommend content are far from perfect, there are filmmakers who are getting their films made because of streaming services, who otherwise would not have been funded. With the money provided by streaming services, more filmmakers are able to share their stories and reach audiences all over the world. As far-right nationalism is on the rise globally, it is important that people are able to access films from outside their language, culture, or country, to see that there is a whole world of cinema if you just look beyond Hollywood.
Wow, amazing, unbelievable. Yeah, I'm foreign language filmmaker, so I have a translator here. Please understand. No. 그 자막, 서브타이틀의 장벽도 아니죠. 한 1인치 정도 되는 그 장벽을 뛰어넘으면 여러분들이 훨씬 더 많은 영화를 즐길 수 있습니다.
Once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films.